Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're exploring an absolute game changer in human history. We're going to look at how a group of hurried ancient merchants working in the Mediterranean invented a remarkably simple tool. And it's a tool that actually outlasted mighty empires, completely revolutionized how we communicate, and ultimately democratized human expression.
Just think about that for a second. Imagine waking up in a world where your grandmother's stories just vanish the very moment they're spoken. A world where the past is literally just a rumor and the future has absolutely no map. Okay, let's dive into this. Picture the bustling, salty harbors of the ancient city of Tyre. We're in the 13th century BC. The docks are totally crowded with ships carrying cedar wood, precious purple dye, and you've got merchants speaking with Egyptians, arguing with Greeks, doing business with literally anyone who will listen. But here's the catch. Business requires memory, and memory requires speed. And speed? Well, that was something the ancient world sorely lacked when it came to writing.
Part 1. The Ancient Communication Crisis.
So let's look at the massive communication problem these ancient merchants were up against. To really understand this crisis, just look at the major writing systems of the day. You had Egyptian hieroglyphs and you had Mesopotamian cuneiform. These were incredibly heavy, bureaucratic systems with thousands of complex symbols. I mean, a single wedge pressed into clay could mean a syllable, it could mean an entire word, or even some abstract concept. Because of this, writing was entirely monopolized by a tiny, exclusive class of highly trained elite scribes. But the Phoenicians? They looked at all that complexity and just decided to strip writing right down to its absolute bones. Their brilliant solution was just 22 simple symbols.
To really grasp why this simplification was so absolutely crucial, consider the number 12. Scientists estimate that mastering a complex character-based writing system, like ancient cuneiform or even modern Chinese, demands roughly 12 years of incredibly dedicated study. 12 years! That meant only a select privileged few could ever even hope to read or write. But contrast that with this number, 2.5. 2.5 years. That's the average time it takes a child to learn to read an alphabet. What the Phoenicians achieved here was a brilliant simplification. By making writing accessible, they effectively redirected millions of hours of human effort from learning endless complex symbols to actually learning and communicating ideas.
Part 2. The 22-letter revolution.
Now, this groundbreaking invention wasn't forged by high priests or mighty kings. Nope, it was designed by pragmatic, seafaring businessmen who just needed to write out fast contracts before the tide rolled out. Their solution was something called an abjad, a consonantal alphabet. They basically threw abstract ideas out the window and left vowels out entirely. Every single one of their 22 symbols represented a pure, distilled consonant sound.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how it worked. Instead of writing out trade and ship with all the vowels, they essentially just wrote TRD and SHP. I know, it sounds almost impossible to read, right? But think about modern text messaging for a second. If I text you BRB, your brain effortlessly fills in the gaps using context. The Phoenicians realized that in the fast-paced world of business, leaving out the non-essential saved massive amounts of time.
Mechanically, they also made things incredibly efficient. Derived from an older script called Proto-Cyrillic, this Phoenician alphabet was the very first writing system to have a fixed horizontal direction, and it was read strictly from right to left. When you're a merchant scratching out a quick invoice onto a broken piece of pottery or a scrap of papyrus, having a single standardized direction makes writing incredibly fast and predictable.
Part 3. How letters got names.
These 22 letters didn't just appear out of thin air. They grew directly out of the lived experiences of these people through a really brilliant system known as acrophony. Basically, what the Phoenicians did was look at the concepts behind Egyptian hieroglyphs, translate those concepts into their own Semitic language, and then, here's the clever part, they used the very first sound of that spoken word as the sound for their new letter.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how recognizable it still is. For example, they drew a simple outline of an ox head. Well, in their language, the word for ox was aleph, so that shape became the sound A. Next, they drew a house. Their word for house was bet, which became the sound B. Put them together, aleph and bet, and what do you get? Alphabet. Everyday things like mem for water or pay for mouth evolved directly into the very letters you and I still use today.
Part 4. Conquest by pure utility.
So, this profoundly useful invention ended up spreading across the globe, but not at the tip of a sword. It spread through pure utility. By the 11th century BC, the script was fully developed. When the Greeks encountered these trading Phoenicians, they absolutely loved this system, but they brilliantly repurposed some unused letters to create vowels, giving us alpha and beta. Later on, the efficiency-obsessed Romans got hold of it and standardized the shapes. They gave us the elegant curve of the S and the strong vertical line of the I. From there, it just branched out into nearly every modern writing system we use today.
And there's this incredible linguistic echo that actually survives to this day. The ancient Phoenician city of Byblos was basically the Mediterranean's papyrus capital. When the Greeks wanted paper, they bought it from Byblos. Because of that, they just started calling the paper itself Byblos. Centuries later, when early Christians needed a name for their collected sacred writings written on this paper, they called it the Biblia, which gives us the modern word Bible. It's a perfect illustration of just how deeply Phoenician trade was woven into global culture.
So the really crucial takeaway here is that the alphabet was incredibly adaptable. The Greeks used it to write epic poetry, the Romans used it to manage a vast empire, Hebrew scribes adopted it, creating the alphabet to preserve their most sacred prayers, and it eventually evolved into the flowing, beautiful script of Arabic. It literally became the universal grammar of human communication because it could capture absolutely any language perfectly.
Part 5. The alphabet's immortal legacy.
Sadly, the physical empire of the Phoenicians met a truly tragic end. Great wealthy cities like Tyre and Sidon were besieged by conquerors like Nebuchadnezzar, and later completely dismantled by Alexander the Great. Their great libraries burned, but their invention? That proved absolutely indestructible. While their cities burned and their ships sank, their alphabet had already escaped, quietly surviving in Greek temples, Roman forums, and Jewish scrolls.
And incredibly, they survived in another way too. Modern DNA laboratories recently analyzed the genetics of people living in modern Lebanon, which was the ancient heart of Phoenicia. What they found were the genetic markers of those ancient maritime traders, passed down in an unbroken chain for 3,000 years. Their descendants are living right now in places like Tunisia, Cyprus, and Spain. It's just a stunning dual legacy. They gave the world its cultural code with the alphabet, and their biological code is literally still walking around today.
Ultimately, the true triumph of the Phoenicians wasn't building massive stone monuments. I mean, the pyramids of Egypt are amazing for sure, but the Phoenicians did something arguably bigger. They broke the scribal monopoly. They made it so a common farmer, a distant soldier, or just a simple potter could learn to write their own name in a week. They made human knowledge democratic, allowing ordinary people to finally capture their thoughts and their stories.
So the next time you tap out a quick text message or type up an email, remember that you are participating in an unbreakable 3,000-year-old chain of communication. You're using an elegant, simplified tool that was created on decks slick with seawater by merchants who were just in a hurry. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other complex problems in our modern world could we solve today with that exact kind of elegant simplification?